Another important use of the z-score is it helps us identify what are called outliers. Outliers are values, or it might be one value, so we'll say value or values, that are far removed from the other data values that can be cause for concern. When I say cause for concern, one thing that we might be aware of is an outlier might be a data entry error. Instead of entering in 79, I entered in 97 or something like that. Or another reason it could be a cause for concern is it might be a legitimate data value, but it's going to heavily skew my results because it's so far removed. It moves the mean up. It increases the range. It throws off the box plot visual of how the data is actually spread out. So it could be cause for concern. Or it could not be cause for concern and needs to be included in the data set. But it's important we take the time to identify who are the outliers, and then based on that, make decisions about whether or not they're actual problems or not. The question then becomes, as we work to identify outliers, what does it mean to be far removed from the other data values? We need a more mathematical definition so we can know for sure if this value is classified as an outlier. An outlier we will define as being more extreme than 2 standard deviations from the mean. In other words, we'll use the formula that x is equal to the mean plus or minus, above or below, those 2 standard deviations from the mean. In other words, we have a z-score of 2 or bigger. Z is bigger than 2, or z is smaller than -2. If the z-score is bigger than 2 or smaller than -2, it is too far removed from the other data values. It will be considered an outlier. So if we had an example that stated that average home prices in a community is $380,000 with a standard deviation of $75,000. What home values in this community would be considered outliers? Well, we know from our formula that we're looking for x values, home values, that are more than 2 standard deviations from the mean. Our mean is 380,000, and our standard deviation is 75,000. So we've got 380,000 plus or minus those 2 standard deviations, those 2 times 75,000, to find out what the extreme values are that are kind of considered acceptable. Because those acceptable values will be 2 standard deviations from the mean, but anything bigger than that, anything outside of that, is an outlier. Well, because of that plus or minus, it actually means 2 operations. We'll do the minus first. If we do 380,000 minus 2 times 75,000, you end up with a $230,000 home. If you do the plus operation, 380,000 plus 2 times 75,000, you end up with a $530,000 home. What this tells us then is any home below 230,000 or above $530,000 is an outlier. So if I look at the community and I see a home for $210,000, I know that $210,000 home, being too small, has a z-score smaller than -2, is an outlier and a possible cause for concern. Or if I see a home for $600,000, it's too big, it's an outlier and a possible cause for concern.